The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, good evening, and it's Christine John Hart. It's Christine John Hart Show. Welcome to this evening, and it's a fine day in London. Bright, very bright, but very cold. I think I've got a guest lined up tonight, but let me see. He's not online at the moment, so we are hanging around. I did have something I wanted to share with you guys. It's a book I have got called The Message, and I was running around. It's half term, so of course the little prince gets most of me, so all of me, in fact. So he wanted to go and get his picture taken at one of those photo booths, so I made that a priority, and I went to help him get these pictures taken and buy one of those frames that you kind of are multi-dimensional, so you can put them in and it looks fantastic. So I was doing that, and of course I thought it would only take a small amount of time, but bang went the day and we had a fantastic time. But of course the radio show, and I haven't managed to speak to my guest earlier. So, so he is not around at the moment. So let's see. Oh, God. Okay. So Taj, yes, are you listening? He set this guy up to come on the show, Thomas Sheridan, and so now I just got an email from Taj saying he's not online, so I just text back, no, he's not online. There we are, one of those things. So this guy isn't online, he's not online, so I wanted to read from this book I have called The Message, which is really good, and it's a kind of beginner's guide to the Bible. And I read the Bible and I always think I must have got this wrong, because the God in it seems like really nasty, especially in the there's someone coming online. I'm wondering if they're coming to say that they can't hear me. Let me check. Oh, yeah, I'm sure I'm being heard. I had this Bible called The Message, which is a new and different way of reading the Bible, a simplistic way of reading the Bible. And it's quite interesting because I always thought I got it wrong, and I always thought that the God that I was reading about couldn't be so nasty. He seemed kind of quite spiteful and vindictive and a bit more like a demon than a god. And so I was quite pleased when I came across this way of reading the Bible called The Message, and it's by someone called Eugene Peterson. I can't lay my hands on it right now. It's so weird because I was reading it in the bath, and the bathroom is like just not far away from where I am at the moment, and yet it's gone missing. Gosh, it's so annoying when you kind of want something and it just goes missing like that. Weird. And of course now I haven't got time to leave air and go and hunt it down, but oh well. Someone's making comments to me in the message thing. Okay. I should tidy up. But it should be here. I suppose it's under a pile of clothes, but I was reading it in the bath earlier. So it was quite interesting because the God in the the God in the God in the Bible that I was reading also seems, even though they've made it sort of, very, very basic, and they've opened it up, so it's more like a storybook, and it's easier for me to swallow, and it's easier for me to see what's going on. For instance, I didn't know that the Old Testament was made up of it's called the Book of Moses, and it's made up of Moses writing. I had no idea of that. I thought it was written by some old rabbis or something, but for all these years. So this is written by Moses, these old books, and Genesis is the beginning. And yeah, I had a lot of trouble with it. I had a lot of trouble with, okay, I can go for Adam and Eve and what happened there, but all of a sudden there's a snake. There's a snake involved in the whole story, and this snake seems to come out of nowhere. And really, if you're telling a story, I don't think that you can have a character that's really dark and just appearing out of nowhere without explaining who he actually is, really. So that is quite, I find that quite odd that that a snake comes out of nowhere. And first of all, you have the birth of this new world that comes from consciousness, and it's thought into life. And then you have, he's making it, and that rings true, that he makes the different trees and this kind of thing. And then the snake comes in, and I don't really get it. I don't get it. And then worst of all, I just got a message from Tajinder that this guy is online. Okay. And then after that, after introducing this character, then we have he tells Moses to fling down sorry. And then you have he tells Moses to fling down his staff, and it will turn into a snake. And that seems to me something that a demon would do. Really, it does. And then why snake? Why not something beautiful? Turns into a snake. And then as it commences on, we have this same God. First of all, he brings flies. So that seems like the Lord of the Flies, which is a demon. And then he brings frogs, and then if that's not enough, there's boils, and then kill all the children. I don't think that's a God at all. It's certainly not my God. I really do reject that God fully. And I was reading it, and I thought that it just really isn't my God at all. So I don't know where everyone else is coming from, but yeah, I don't know where everyone else is coming from, but that definitely didn't that definitely doesn't seem like my God at all. And then, God, I wish I could find this book, but I just can't see it. It's mad. So then, yeah, then it went on just talking about the chosen people. And then I thought again, yeah, he's talking about the Jewish people, the chosen people, and I'm not Jewish. So then I have to wonder about that as well, that maybe this isn't a particular kind of entity that isn't to do with God at all. And it certainly isn't a God. And I'm wondering then, because I've only got to chapter 1, I've only got to Genesis, and then I'm wondering if that it changes, or I'm wondering if when Jesus Christ comes into view, whether he will start talking about that God being the real God, or not. So Yeah, completely confused here with the whole darn thing. And I can't seem to find the book. I am wondering whether I should put some effort in to try and track it down. It's so annoying that I can't find it because then I could actually read from it while I'm waiting for my guest. So I'm going to pause a sec and just make a concerted effort to find it. So please bear with me. Arthur, can you see my book, The Message? Well, shit. I had it earlier and I just can't find it. What the hell? Damn it. Where can it have gone? Can you quickly look downstairs for me, please? Okay, got it. Thank you. Oh, shit. I am back again, but I think for some reason, I'm pretty sure I'm not on air anymore, but I'm not really sure. Oh, gosh, it's so annoying. I don't think I'm on air. I really don't think so, but perhaps I am. There's no way of finding out. Golly, it's annoying. Let me see if I can find out. One sec. I don't see. My Skype is spinning. Spinning. Isn't it great to have this brand new computer and it's not working? Okay. Fantastic. Not. So I don't know whether I'm on air or not. Somebody is Taj is helping me. So he says. Okay, right. Here we are. Golly, it's quite hard to read in this light. I got to when he was killing the children, which is utterly awful. Okay, I'm just testing to see if I am on air because I'm not sure that I am, but I'll carry on reading anyway. This bit. Okay, no. Okay, so where are we? Okay, so I'm going to read from Exodus 14, which is about where I got to, and we are on the story and song of salvation. God spoke to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn around and make camp at Pi Hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. Camp on the shore of the sea opposite Baal Zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are lost, they're confused. The wilderness has closed in on them. Then I'll make Pharaoh's heart stubborn again, and he'll chase after them. And I'll use Pharaoh and his army to put my glory on display. Then the Egyptians will realize that I am God. Oh my God. Does that sound like God? It just sounds like a demon. It really does. I'll read on. And that is what happened. Verse 5 to 7. When the king of Egypt was told that the people were gone, he and his servants changed their minds. They said, what have we done, letting Israel, our slave labor, go free? So he had his chariots harnessed up and got his army together. He took 600 of his best chariots with the rest of the Egyptian chariots and their drivers coming along. This is all to be seen, everybody, in the movie Gods and Exodus. It's the one with Christian Bale in. It's pretty good. God's out of it, something like that. Anyway, God made Pharaoh, king of Egypt, stubborn, determined to chase the Israelites as they walked out on him without even looking back. The Egyptians gave chase and caught up with them where they had made camp by the sea. All Pharaoh's horse-drawn chariots and their riders, all his foot soldiers there at Pi Hahiroth opposite Baal Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and saw them. Egyptians coming at them! They were totally afraid. They cried out in terror to God, the demon. They cried out to their demon. Sorry, they cried out to God. They told Moses, weren't the cemeteries large enough in Egypt so that you had to take us out here in the wilderness to die? What have you done to us, taking us out of Egypt? Back in Egypt, didn't we tell you this would happen? Didn't we tell you? Leave us alone here in Egypt. We're better off as slaves in Egypt than as corpses in the wilderness, you idiot. Moses spoke to the people. Don't be afraid. Stand firm and watch God do his work of salvation for you today. Take a good look at the Egyptians today, for you're never going to see them again. God will fight battle for you, and you keep your mouth shut. God said to Moses, why cry out to me? Speak to the Israelites. Order them to get moving. Hold your staff high and stretch your hand out over the sea. Split the sea. The Israelites will walk through the sea on dry ground. Meanwhile, I'll make sure the Egyptians keep up their stubborn chase. I'll use Pharaoh and his entire army, his chariots and horsemen, to put my glory on display so that the Egyptians will realize that I am God. I'm sorry, this just doesn't sound like God at all. This sounds like a peacock of a demon, it really does. I am sure of it. I am sure. The angel of God that had been leading the camp out of Israel now shifted and got behind them. Actually, I'm not sure if I'm on air at the moment because nobody seems to be able to tell me whether I'm on air or not. Taj has disappeared. His guest is a no-show. So, sabotager. I'm going to reboot my computer, so please bear with me. I'll be back on air in 3 minutes. Hi, hopefully I am back on air, and I'm sorry about that, everybody, but I had to check. I thought I was talking to myself, and somebody says, yeah, sorry, Patrick English, who said that I'm coming through loud and clear and I don't need to reboot. It's just everything was so silent and nobody was speaking to me when I was saying, oh, my honor. So, yeah, so I'm back again, and sorry about that. Actually, my guest now has shown, so I'm going to add him in. I was quite enjoying slagging off the Old Testament, but maybe I can rope this guy into slagging off the Old Testament with me. Okay, let's see if I can bring him on now. Okay, add people to this call. I am so technically minded, not that cool. Oh, so Jenny, I need a drink. It's only 7 o'clock. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Christine. I'm sorry about my getting the wires crossed. I thought it was next week for some reason.
Oh, don't worry, that's okay. I had a book that I was reading beside me, so I was just I was just reading it out to everybody. So
It's a live broadcast show?
yes, it is. It is. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is Thomas Sheridan, everybody, and Thomas, what do you do over there in Ireland?
I write books, I make films, I paint pictures, I make sculptures, I travel around from one megalithic site to the next. I chase serial killers in Manchester. I do lots of things.
Oh, excellent. What serial killers were you? Because I've written a lot on Brady. You probably don't know, but never mind. Which serial killers at the moment are on the loose in Manchester? Seems to be a breeding ground, doesn't it, for them?
Yeah, it does seem to be a breeding ground, which I find very strange. The Hindleys, the Dr. Shipman, etc. There. About 2 years ago, I made a film. Well, I saw a newspaper article by a Dr. Craig Jackson, who was a professor at the University of Birmingham, and he had mentioned that there was far too many suicides in the canal system in Birmingham for it to be, not, inconsequential or, coincidental. And so he was basically savaged. He gave forth a very good idea of what was going on, and he was basically savaged by the tabloids. So I made a film just to sort of like stick up for the guy, because I thought his theories was sound, called Blind Spot: A Serial Killer in Manchester ? Just outlining Professor Jackson's ideas and adding my own spin to it. I've written 2 books on psychopathology, and the film took off really fast, and next thing you know, I was in, I got 2-page spread, the Daily Mirror. I was in newspapers all over the world, and it's now a big issue. The serial killer is known locally as the Pusher. Now, he or she may be also part of a gang, but we're talking about almost 100, if not more than 100, bodies of young men of a very specific demographic found in the canal systems of Manchester since 2009. So,
isn't there's a girl called Steve, or she calls herself a boy's name, Stephen Young, aren't they? She contacted me. She's an author a while ago to ask me did I know about this, and I didn't. And then she brought in a film company who were doing a film about it.
yeah.
They think it's a cult, don't they?
Well, that's one of the things. I'm kind of a bit nervous about that idea because I don't want to run away too far down the road yet, but it may well be. Look, when you look at Moira Hindley and Liam Brady, essentially that was kind of a microcult. That's basically what that was in terms there's only two at a minute, but it was a microcult. But all you need is two to actually have that kind of effect. See, as the Hindleys got caught, Hindley and Brady got caught when they murdered someone in front of a third party.
Smith.
And so that was the kind of that's so you don't need like a gang of 50 people to have a cult that would do this kind of things. So yeah, it's definitely something that's interesting me more and more. At first, I would have thought the profile would be like a repressed gay man, possibly seriously homophobic, hang-up, psychotic. The idea of throwing the victims into the canal is obviously a professional, because canal water, between its decades, centuries of heavy metals and so on, as well as the fact that it's slow moving water, it's a great place to hide DNA. So it was I just made that film basically to just, this man needs support, and I was glad to help him because the police in Manchester are acting very strange in the whole thing. They're just, literally someone could be found. The one particular case was a young guy who was from Halifax who was visiting Manchester. He was thrown into the canal, and he was found in the canal dead. Right before he went into the water, he called his mother on his mobile phone and was screaming, and the police still said it was inconclusive and probably an accidental drowning.
Horrid. And wasn't the blood drained from some of them, and someone had bite marks and all sorts of weird stuff?
No, I never heard that one.
Oh, right.
No, I mean, who knows? I didn't hear that. See, well, they haven't released the coroner's report because it's a freedom of information issue, but I haven't heard that.
Right. Oh, yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? What made you start being interested in serial killers?
Well, I wrote a best-selling book. I'm pretty funny. You don't know who I am, but I wrote a best-selling book.
Oh, sorry. It was
Not from an egotistical point of view. It's just that I just find that funny. It's kind of nice in a way. Virgin territory after all these years. But I wrote a best-selling book in 2011 called Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. I was studying psychopathology in corporate environments. I used to work on Wall Street as a graphic designer. I used to work for Goldman Sachs and a few other companies. And I was for years trying to figure out these people that I worked with, particularly senior management of the financial industry. And I found that descriptions and profiles of serial killers and criminal psychology documents were actually better at actually profiling these people than any other kind of corporate psychology, profiling killers, except they didn't kill anybody. And so that came out of that, and that was basically my interest in serial killers came out of a need to try and understand pathological behavior in corporate and governmental structures. And at the time, there was very little around that back then in terms of even research materials. And so that's how it was literally all I could find at the time.
So you'd moved from Ireland then to America? You were living in America?
Yeah, I lived in America for 10, 11 years. I went over there to play in a band originally and try to become a rock star, which I didn't. But then I studied graphic design and ended up working in Wall Street, yeah.
Oh, right. And did you get fed up of America?
Kind of a little bit. New York kind of died and it just lost its magic. It become very gentrified and yuppie. And the days of I loved New York when it was a dump. It was like full of culture and art and interesting people and weirdness and strangeness and a lot of things I enjoy most in life. It was a great place for an artistic mind to sort of like be. You could still afford to live in places like Manhattan. Granted, it'd probably be like close to a slum and somewhere like Chinatown, but you could still do it. Now it was changing rapidly. It was, the gentrification, zero tolerance thing was coming in. They were chasing out. All the poor neighborhoods were becoming very affluent, and I just couldn't afford to live there anymore. And plus, the magic was gone out of the place when Rudolph Giuliani. This is like I left just before 9/11. When Rudolph Giuliani and has cleaned up the mayor of the city, cleaned it up. He took the soul out of it, and places where you used to have like interesting bars and restaurants or just characters on the street corners, or suddenly Disney stores were popping up and all this kind of nonsense. So that was the end for me.
Oh, it's a shame. I lived in Queens for a while, and it was so
Which
Italian.
which neighborhood in Queens?
Oh God, I can barely remember. It was an Italian neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a few of them. Yeah, I used to live in Bayside and Woodside for a while there in Queens. Yeah.
Name some parts of Queens. I'm
Oh,
trying.
there's loads of them. Woodlawn, Queens. I'm trying to think of the Italian areas. It wasn't Forest Hills or somewhere like that.
No, that doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, I know a middle village.
No.
There's a lot. That's funny how New York, Queens, the neighborhoods used to be like that. They were like Irish, Italian, or Jewish, or whatever. It was like they were little tribes.
Yeah, it was awesome. I went over to America when I was fairly young, but 22, and just was walking around in this, and I had my suitcase with me, and there was a Italian guy, and he kept following me, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I've come to live." And he said, "Well, have you got everything set up?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "I'll come and get you tomorrow, and I'll set you up with a friend of mine who's got an apartment." So he came to pick me up from the hotel next day, just put my suitcase in the back of his car, and drove off to an apartment in Queens with someone, yeah, friend of his.
Well, you're a very brave girl.
It worked out well. It was an unusual place. I had an apartment in Harlem and actually got mugged there, but that was when it was all very, is it still very black in Harlem?
Yeah, well, no, that's changing as well. That's becoming very gentrified. That part around 125th Street, that's also lost its soul, as well. Well, what year were you there? When did you arrive?
Oh God, when was it? It was in the 90s at some point.
Yeah,
1999? No.
I had left by then.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
All
so
right.
it's funny. I think I left in '98.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It was a really, really cool place. I'd love to go back actually. I moved down to LA as well. Have you been to Los Angeles?
Yeah, I've been all over the US, so I'm not everywhere, but yeah, it's like I didn't. Yeah, I prefer in America. I prefer what America used to be, old, gritty, interesting places, and a lot of them are kind of vanished as hipsters and yuppies take over. But you don't live in the US now, do you?
Oh God, no, London. I came back to London. It must have been the early 90s because I came back. When did I came back here? I went to Los Angeles and came back. God, it all swims in front of me, the years.
I know the feeling.
And you tell people, yeah, that was only 5 years ago, and they're like, well, that was 2006, and you're like, no, it wasn't, was it? Oh my God, it sort of all smushes in front of you. Yeah, I came back. I've been back here a long, long time, and I moved to Ireland as well. Ireland is gorgeous, just beautiful place
Where
to
did
live.
you, where did you live in Ireland?
Belfast.
Okay. Yeah, I'm originally from Dublin myself. I live in Sligo in the northwest of Ireland now.
Oh, it's gorgeous down there. It's really North County Dublin, I think, is nice.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like the nice rural area.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, tell me about your life. So you went then you made the film and then you wrote a few books.
No,
And
the film was fairly recently. No, I've written several books. I'm interested in a lot of subjects. I'd say that my interest in psychopathology was more of a kind of a necessity. I was looking for a guidebook to actually
mm,
survive this place. It was like literally that bad. And my main interest are things like magic, ancient mysteries. I'm very interested in the occult. I'm very interested in these kinds of ideas. I'm very interested in symbolism. I'm very interested in mind control and things like that. How basically unseen forces run our lives, run us.
mm. Tom, you've gone dead. You've gone dead. Could you hang up? I'm going to call you again. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, I've lost you. So I don't know what's happening tonight. If you Can replace the phone. Sorry, replace the Skype and I'll ring you through again. I don't know what's going on. Good Lord, what is going on? I think I'm still Corona. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. Oh, jeez, jeez, jeez. Looks like I'm still on air, but I seem to have lost Tom. I don't know what is going on. Let me ask Patrick. He is trying to ring in again. This is so annoying. What is wrong? Oh, so annoying. Bloody hell. I think it's me. It must be me. Oh, Christ. Oh, God. Hi, back again. I'm really sorry about that. It started to screw up and then we lost our guest. So let's try again. It seems like we're being interfered with tonight, so I'm not super happy about that. So that's the way it goes. You're being attacked. You're being attacked. There we go. Suck it up. Hi, Tom, you back? No, it's just connecting up. Hopefully we'll get our guest back. It's ringing. He's not back with us yet. Okay. Tom? So I'm still trying to get back hold. Still trying to get back hold of Tom, but he is, I don't know what's happening there with him. No answer, it says. So I'm trying again. Wait till he stops bubbling. Okay, yeah, he is bubbling. Sorry, tonight's show is a little bit chaotic, people. Oh my Lord. It's tech has gone crazy and he might be on mute. Hang on, I'll ask him. I'm gonna ask him. He seems to have gone. He seems to have gone. So oh dear. Maybe we can cut this part out. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? Maybe he's gone. It was probably awful to have someone interviewing you that hasn't researched properly. I was going to research and half term sucked me in with the complete... you know how it is. If you're a mother, that's it. Then everything else falls to the wayside. He's typing. I think he's back now. So hopefully back now. Okay.
Am I back?
Oh, good. There you are at last.
Yeah, my Skype crashed and I had to restart my PC.
Oh, right. Mine did the same. So that's weird, isn't it? No, never mind.
Yeah.
So as you were saying, then what got you interested in the occult, or was it being Irish that it was always in your blood anyway?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it was always in my blood from a lot. I'll tell you what happened. When I was about 10, 11, we went on a school trip to Newgrange, the megalithic site, just about 40 miles north of Dublin, inside the passage cairn, inside the megalithic structures in the Boyne Valley. And it just blew my mind. It was just all I wanted to think about. These ancient people 5,000 years ago built this temple to the sun. And I guess just from that, when I got a little older, reading books on magic and things like that, and on the occult, like David Conway's book on magic was a huge influence on me when I was in my teens. And I guess from that, now you're probably, I never thought about that before, but you're probably right. Probably my first time to encounter ancient, mystical sites in Ireland was probably what launched that spark for me. So you're probably right there, yeah.
I think being Irish, we probably all got it in our blood, really, that the slightly psychic thing, slightly. It does seem like people from Ireland do have that, whereas you come to England, I often find when I go to Ireland, like it's in the air. The air is clearer somehow, and people you meet tend to be of that ilk. Whereas when, like England, for example, it's sort of a lot of bit more shut down.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing too. I think it's a Celtic thing. You get it in Iberia, the Celtic parts of Iberia and Spain and Portugal. You get it in those kinds of locations. You get in the Celtic parts of England, like around Glastonbury. And I mean, I find like when I'm over in England, well, then again, I tend to gravitate towards places that would attract those kinds of people. But I find it's very strong there too. I think Ireland was never conquered by the Romans. I think that actually helped a lot.
Oh, I see. Is that why we're so sort of shut down? Is it the Roman influence?
Yeah, I think the Roman influence on Britain is phenomenal. I mean, you go to the British Museum in London, there's almost nothing from, like the Britons, the pre-Roman Britons in the museum, or Celtic or anything, even though that was just as much there as it is here. It's everything is Roman, Roman, Roman. Everything is completely Roman, Britannia, this kind of thing. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the Romans. The Romans got to Ireland with religion, the Catholic Church. That's really what St. Patrick was. He was like the kind of Henry Kissinger of his day. But when they eventually took the Druids out here kind of slowly, although they played a big part in undermining Christianity here too in the early days. I think the reason why there's a lot of reasons why Ireland, our mythology, which is absolutely ancient, still exists. England's mythology was lost. There was two things to that: one, the Romans, and secondly, the Normans with the harrying of the north and things like the Norman laws and so on like that. These are the kinds of things that wiped out the folk traditions in England. And then finally the Industrial Revolution, when people moved to this, from the countryside, a place like Manchester and Birmingham, to feed the dark satanic mills. I think there was a what's his name, William Blake was bang on when he coined that phrase. I think it was more than just capitalism he was talking about. I think he was talking about the soul of England was finally being snuffed out under these smokestacks.
Oh, really? Why do you think that was? Was it a threat in some kind of way?
How do you mean?
A threat to, satanic forces normally sort of snuff out things that are a threat to it.
Yeah, I think he was probably just using the term satanic in metaphor, which I think which is what most people do, just to sort of use it. If you look at Satanism, I mean, I have a few friends who are Satanists, and they're perfectly decent people. It's more like a form of Darwinism and stuff like that. But I think satanic has become an all-round term to basically portray any kind of dark occultism or any kind of pathological occultism. Yeah, I think he used it in those terms, but I think he was talking about like that basically when the rural people left England and went to the cities to work in the factories, so much was lost. Like cultures and folk traditions going back centuries were lost.
What brought the class structure? I think that is what kills the spirit of England, that class structure, because it's really.
Romans.
Oh, really? They did.
Yeah, really, it's just like an imperial Roman structure. If you look at the imperial Roman, even when they had the Republic, it was very, very class orientated. You basically what the working class people of England today would be what the slaves were in ancient Rome, and then you'd have like the citizens of Europe, the middle class are now, and then you'd have like the kind of the more aristocratic classes is what the Romans definitely brought that. Absolutely, they brought that class system. The class system in Britain is awful. It's awful. It's one of the things I think holds back. It holds back that country in many ways. If you look at when Britain has done really well culturally, it's when working class people like rose to the top, just like when with rock music and stuff like that. And but if you look at the whole class system is almost designed to stifle the English working classes in particular, to stifle them and make and have them believe that they have no part to play in culture creation.
Exactly. They say it's moved on but from when I was a kid, if anything, it's got worse. I mean, it really has got worse.
That's interesting. I was reading, there was a great article, I think it was in the Observer about 2 years ago, by the actress Julie Walters. Remember her? She was in
Yeah.
Educating Rita. And she was saying that there was almost like a period in the 60s when they opened the door and they said, okay, working class people,
Yeah.
all these snobs, all these types in Cambridge and stuff, opened the door and said, okay, working class people, you've got a small window of opportunity here to go out and become famous and this kind of thing. And you had like people from working class backgrounds becoming musicians, writers, sports stars, all kinds of things. And then when it came to the early 90s, we say the end was probably Britpop with like the bands like Oasis. They closed the door and said, no more, that's it. And she pointed out that even if you look at the pop stars today, like the likes of Coldplay and Chris Martin, they all went to the same schools as like members of the royal family. And even the ones who get into acting jobs, like and get into RADA, they're all like aristocrats. So there's a lot of truth to that. Every so often they open a window, say, here, have a try, and then they close it again.
Gosh, I didn't know that. It's made me quite angry. Being working class and like, even as a writer, I know, when I submit to literary agents, I know that they're all upper middle class. They talk in a certain way. They don't want you in their club, and I know it's just going to get looked over because I don't talk in a certain way, that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot more freedom in Ireland for artists, definitely. I found that too. Like you go to like a literary agent here will probably talk the same accent you do. I found it. I think there's a lot more free, mainly because we had to fight our way out of the British Empire. But I think there's a lot more freedom that way, artistic freedom here. Tell me about your writing. What kind of writing do you do yourself?
Well, I did something about the IRA actually. I was just talking to my son about that. Actually, we kind of meet in the middle because I did a bit on serial killers. My last book was on both Brady, who I met a few times, and then
Oh, really? Cool. Go on.
yeah, I met him a few times when I was really, really super young, and then in the mid-90s when I was a bit older, and then I met the serial killer Kenneth Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler.
No, I'm not familiar with that case. I've heard that name, but I don't know anything about the case.
Well, it's quite interesting because you said cult, and I do have that view of Brady's crimes that he did start a cult, and then I became interested in Bianchi because again there was that killing as a couple. He was Angelo Bono and Kenneth Bianchi, Hillside Stranglers. There was a film actually with
Yeah, it's coming back to me now. It was in the 80s in like LA or somewhere like that.
yeah,
Yeah, it's coming back to me now. Yeah.
and Richard Crenna played a role. Billy Zane played Bianchi. I met him. God, when was it? 2009. I met him. The Guardian commissioned me to go out there. I met him on Valentine's Day. Interestingly, so the story is going to be called Valentine's Day with the Hillside Strangler, but it turned out they didn't want it in the end because I just felt sorry for Bianchi. I know what he did was terrible, but I mean, I do think that mind control plays a part, in these serial killers. They're not really what you expect when you meet them. You don't really feel the evil sort of seeping out of them, but they do seem to have like alter personalities.
Well, I think what you say about mind control and government killbots and programming, that's very common with cults. So if there's an occult aspect to a cult, CULT, not occultic, a cult aspect to it, there's almost like generally you find that just about every cult that's been successful has been created by either the military or the intelligence services.
Really?
And absolutely, it's a huge thing. I mean, I'm having trouble coming up trying to find cults that have not been created by the military or the intelligence services.
Right? Why?
Yeah.
Why? Why is that then?
Well, if you can convince people who have PhDs that say a 400-pound chain-smoking, bombastic career criminal woman who has a Ouija board in front of her is the light of the world and is capable of channeling herself in the future as a super being on another planet, and none of its predictions come true, but you still believe this person to be some kind of god, then you can be made to believe anything. And this is what they do. They're mind control experimental fields. That's why the vast majority of people who join cults tend to be highly educated. I mean, formally educated, PhDs and so on. Also with the cults, they're where they groom killbots. This is where you get, your assassins and stuff like that, or people that infiltrate. It only works if they still think they're doing it for the cult. So suppose I want to do some espionage on someone. Suppose I'm a military kind of like espionage intelligence person, and I want to get the handle on you, right? I would probably set up a cult, and then I would set up these. I'd train all these mindless cult followers, and then I would send them out and say, "This woman Christine, I think she's trying to undermine our sanctity. She doesn't believe in the comet clusters that are going to come and save us and move us to the fifth density. I want you to go out and learn everything about her, become her friend." Well, so then you have a situation where someone comes to you under the guise of a religious cult type person, but they're actually working unknowingly for the intelligence services, because they're not. It's not like an intelligence agent who's come to your door and or come to your life who's spying on you, but it's a person who thinks they're doing it for their cult leader who's actually doing the same job. It's a very clever tactic. This is what the Mark Chapman, and then also Mark Chapman was absolutely cult program over his life. The guy who killed John Lennon.
Yeah.
He was in a cult in Hawaii, and they totally raised him up to believe all these hopeful things, and then they basically beat him up and stole his money. And then from that, the rest of his life was to be disappointed and betrayed, until he was activated by a cult in Yonkers in upstate New York in 1980 and sent down to kill John Lennon. Basically, he was programmed to believe that John Lennon was the cause of all the problems in his life. So this is why the intelligence services. I mean, the French military has an entire division connected to creating cults. They've created cults all like the south of France is the headquarter of all the cults, and a lot of them are based down there. The Raelians are down there, and the Solar Temple, of course, the one that were in France and Switzerland that committed the mass suicide back in the about 10 years ago, and there's probably well over 100 of them were killed. In mass suicides and murder killings all over France and Switzerland because they believe a comet was coming and it was a spaceship. Yeah, they all go back to intelligence services, all of them. You'd be hard pressed to find one that doesn't.
So what do you think? Oh, I don't believe we're going to break. We're just going to break for 4 minutes, Tom.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Sorry, can you just hang loose for 4 minutes while they run the adverts?
No worries.
Thank you.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hi, we're back on air, and it's Thursday evening, and you're with Christine Joanna Hart and my wonderful guest, Thomas Sheridan, who's an author and filmmaker, and we're in the middle of a chat, so the adverts buzzed in, so I'll get back to what we were talking about. Tom, are you still with me?
Here I am.
Oh, great. Yeah, you were saying, I found that interesting because Brady and Bianchi, they were very alike in that both had a really strong occultic leaning. Brady was into using the tarot. He spoke to a face of death and did the killings for the face of death. And, when you meet him, he's quite innocuous. He does have an altar. That's the killing altar. The same with Bianchi. Bianchi is like really strongly demonically influenced. I mean, I had a really horrible, after knowing him for about 2 years and going to meet him, I had a horrible experience where I was watching TV one night and I kind of felt him crawl inside my consciousness as if he was trying to look out my eyes. It was really scary. And then I spoke to a writer who had met him, Chris Berry D, and he said that he had the same experience. So he is quite powerful occultically, although he won't admit it if you ask him, but he's full of it. I mean, he said, "Oh, I'm not into that kind of thing," and then he tried to get me to help him sell his novels, and the novels were just full of it, really just pure occult novels, really, basically, as same with a lot of his poetry. So are you saying that these people come from a military creation?
If they're involved in cults, they often do. That's fascinating what you just said, because I've heard similar stories about Jimmy Savile, of all people, that after he was dead, people felt like they were being possessed by him. Particularly, this is one of the reasons why, what's his name, Peter Sutcliffe, who's at Boardmore, they were trying to get as much information out of him as possible because he was friends with Savile. And there's one thing where I heard him talking about Savile, and he was terrified of him, even though Savile was dead. He was terrified of him. So that's very interesting that you said that. Now, what you said about Brady, I want to ask you a question there. I've never met Brady, but I know people that have. Now, Brady's family background is a bit of a mystery. We know who his mother is, but his father appears not to, the one that raised him in Gorbals in Glasgow is apparently not his natural father. And his real father is alleged to be an aristocratic journalist in Scotland. Now, and people have told me that they have met Brady, that he has an almost aristocratic air about him. Did you find that?
Yeah, it's an imperious thing. He's full of himself. Yeah, he's not really, but then he can be sort of working class. He puts on an act. He does act for people that come in. I did.
Yeah.
I introduced him to the writer Colin Wilson, who used to be a friend of mine before he died.
Oh,
And
look, you. He's one of my heroes.
oh, is he? I used to stay
Yeah.
over at his house.
Oh.
He is nice. He wrote an introduction for my first book, actually. So I introduced Brady to Wilson, and I did say to Wilson, he'll put on an act for you. And it was interesting to read my letters from Brady and then read the ones to Wilson, where they were very imperious, but my ones were very sort of working class and sort of. He does,
It's the typical psychopath thing. He was creating a kind of a personality for each person he manipulated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Colin Wilson said something about Brady. He said that he was writing to him for a while, and something happened. I think he said he couldn't answer a letter once to Brady, and there was a gap in it. And Brady wrote this bombastic, infantile, sort of like childlike rant in a letter towards Colin Wilson. And Colin Wilson then said, look, it's no big deal. Something happened. I wasn't able to write back to you. And he said, oh, that's okay. So like the whole personality structures that are invented for each individual. That's fascinating stuff. That to me. Don't forget, Brady was also fascinated by Joseph Mengele.
Was he?
Oh yeah, the first dates with what's her name? Maura Hindley was to see these kind of this documentary series that was shown in the cinema in Manchester called Crimes of the Third Reich. It was all about the kill. It was all about the killings and the death camps and stuff. He learned fluent German. Did you know that? So he could actually be and feel like his hero Mengele. He actually learned old aristocratic, old High German. The guy was an intellectual. As so many of these sort of like instinctual dark magicians tend to be.
I was wondering, do you think he was created by the military to do what he did?
I don't think so, but I think I think in their case, he genuinely was a case of a monster, and she was the kind of like his familiar. But I think there are certain killers that definitely have military screaming all over them. Son of Sam in New York was definitely one. David Berkowitz. In fact, his associations with the Process Church, which are kind of this weird neo-Nazi kind of chaos magic group that existed. Well, they still exist. Jimmy Savile was actually even featured in one of their magazines back in their sex issue, believe it or not, back in the 60s. But yeah, I think in those cases they were. I mean, the Manson family is another one too. They were all Process Church members, except for Manson. All the ones that did the killing, such as Squeaky Fromm and Susan Atkins, they were all Process Church members.
And what do the military get out of that?
Well, like I said before, they get mind control training. See, if you can get these people to believe to believe that their cult leader is the son of God or some kind of mystical being, you can get these people to believe anything. So they will find those tools, and then they will try and create like killbots, soldiers who will kill for the same reason they'll kill without conscience. They become made to believe anything, and also, as I said earlier on, the espionage as well. Yeah, they'll send a cult. If the military wants to spy on you and me, they won't send someone who's from the Pentagon or from MI5. They'll send a cult member who thinks he's spying on behalf of the leader, and that's who will be spying on you. So that they'll use them as sort of like piggyback espionage. Because they don't have that military training. You see, people who have been in the military have a stiffness about them. Cult members generally don't.
I'm wondering if Bianchi and Bono were that kind of. They kill girls consecutively in a sort of a spree. Does seem odd to me. And they did use like torture methods, like gassing and injecting bleach. And I know people say, well, it was sadists,
Yeah.
But is it that? I mean, really? I
think it's a combination of all those things. I think ultimately all psychopaths are driven by power and control at the end of the day. I mean, Ted Bundy said when he murdered somebody that he felt that the moment of pleasure was the second when the woman lost her life and life slipped out of her. He said he felt like a god. So they're driven by those kinds of things as well. They're almost like secular pathological gods in their own minds.
It's odd why they do it, though. I mean, it can't be that great. If you think about how much they're risking just for a little feeling, I mean, does that ring true? Might it be
but
something?
that's the power, isn't it? Like the risk and getting away with it. It produces incredible rushes of endorphins and other neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and adrenaline in their lower brainstem, and it provides an incredible rush. I'd imagine it's kind of similar. I don't know, like when we were teenagers and we had our first girlfriend or boyfriend and snuck them into your bedroom and stuff like that. It was almost like the naughtiness of it was as exciting as actually, getting a snog or whatever like that. Now multiply that by 1 billion in terms of like criminal behavior or murder, and you could imagine what the I think that's what drives a lot of pedophiles as well. That a lot of the kind of wealthy pedophiles are driven by the same thing too. I think, like suppose you're a billionaire, you can get anyone, you can get any call girl you want. Eventually the thrill will be gone, like the old BB King song, and you'll move on to other things. Maybe try guys, maybe try group sex, and eventually it always seems to be that these types always gravitate towards children in the end. It's a very weird thing. There was this freak called Jared Fogle. He was the spokesperson for Subway sandwiches in America, and he's a classic example of that. He got sudden fame for losing lots of weight eating Subway sandwiches on the Oprah show, and he went from banging beautiful girls that he was picking up because he was a celebrity, getting fed up with that, moving on to guys, moving on to group sex, and eventually he was busted because he was like sourcing 10-year-old boys. So he was stung by an FBI agent posing as a pedophile trying to arrange to get boys for him. And the letters, they were published online in a few newspapers that this guy Fogle wrote. I remember he was the all-American boy, that this guy had written. There's pictures of him with George Bush and everything. Had written to this guy. It'd absolutely make your stomach turned away. He talks about how he's turned on my 10-year-old boys and things like that. It's better than any beautiful call girl and stuff like that. This is what happens with these people. It's almost like this demon takes over them. Maybe some kind of demon does take them over, and it's actually this daimonic reflection or resonance inside them that's actually driving the pathology to these more perverted, degenerate and pathological things. Look at someone like Savile, for instance. Jimmy Savile doesn't seem human to me anymore. I didn't even know as a kid he didn't see human. You know what I mean? It's like, is it them, or are they a vessel for something else inside them? That's the entity that's really after this stuff.
I think with Brady, it definitely was, because I always wanted to meet the killer, to kind of examine and, get your fingers in there and find out why you had to do something so evil. But I never really met that killer. And I noticed when he was talking to Topping that he talked about having the black box, the black box I never go near, and that kind of thing. And I asked him about that, and I believe that was a killing altar, the part of him that killed, and he sort of boxed it up. And when he went to prison, it's all boxed up. And it's the same with Bianchi. He looked me in the eyes and he said, oh, the girls that died. And I said, you mean the women that were murdered? I mean, he said the women that died. That was it. The women that died. And I thought, well, they didn't die and they weren't women. I said, the girls that were murdered. And he sort of looked away and he couldn't really, I don't think they can face any of it, and they box it up in a little box, which kind of backs up that it might be demonic and not really them.
And that's also very typical of psychopaths, is that, this could still be the demonic thing as well, is that they have personality constructions for each facet of his behavior. So, like, for instance, they would interview, I saw a fantastic survey of study on psychopaths in Canadian prisons back in the 90s. And they would ask the psychopath a question like, well, you're in here, John, for raping 10 women. Oh, no, I didn't rape those women. I'm not a rapist. No, they say, you're in here, you're a rapist, John. That's why you're in here. And he'd go, I'm not a rapist. And he goes, what do you mean you're not a rapist? You were convicted of raping 10 women. And he goes, no. I was a rapist when I was raping the women. I'm not a rapist now. The personality had been replaced. But that also kind of transfers in the idea of this kind of daimonic personality. For instance, like even Sutcliffe, it's in what you call it, David Yallop's books on the Yorkshire River, but not on many others, that Sutcliffe claims that he had seen a statue in a graveyard, and there was a statue in the graveyard came to life in Yorkshire and told him that prostitutes were the cause of all the world's problems, and he was to kill them. And the same thing happened with Berkowitz in New York. He came into a dog. He saw a dog in a park in Yonkers, and that dog was actually the son of Sam. So yeah, I think like this is a powerful subject. And I think you're absolutely right about Brady. He has all those kind of manifestations he was almost like a skin suit, a skin job, and there was something else working inside him. I'd definitely be down with that.
Oh yeah, because he's very, what I've noticed about him and Bianchi is they're very effeminate, like really effeminate. You're almost like meeting a little girl kind of thing. There's not much man there. There's hardly any male, and then people, when they interview you, and a lot of people interviewed me, the media, about meeting him, and they're very disappointed if you say that. So you almost have to sort of turn it around and say, oh, but I was scared or something, like that. But it's quite hard to feel scared of them when they're being themselves, because they're very almost like wispy, so they probably are the kind of things that would have entities come into them, because there's not much going on there.
There's also some very powerful links between psychopathy and high levels of testosterone. Now, testosterone is an interesting hormone in that you can kind of like force it into yourself. And it's almost like the more a psychopath preys, the more testosterone their brain releases. So that would make perfect sense. So they could be in jail, like you said. They're not killing anyone anymore, and therefore their testosterone levels would probably collapse.
Oh,
and that makes perfect sense. I'm glad you told me that, because that's actually solved the mystery for me.
Right. So maybe they're killing to feel like men because they don't feel like men.
Yeah, maybe it's they're not even like us. Like psychopaths are a completely different kind of human being altogether. They're just not like us.
Yeah, I was trying to get to the bottom of those guys, but then I thought, what am I doing? You know, I spent about 2 decades, and I thought, what's going on here?
Yep. Well, that's why I don't write books about psychopaths anymore. I don't go and study it anymore because it answered a question for me. It was very, very dark. I was starting to get letters from psychopaths, letters from victims of psychopaths. I was having nightmares. It was frightening me. I started to feel very negative about the world, and I just had to stop basically
Hmm.
and go back to where I started off in the occult and ancient mysteries and megaliths and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But you're right; it's one of those things that when you get the answer on the phone, hang the feckin' phone up. You know that's the answer.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it got dark for me. As I was coincidentally, I was reading from the Old Testament just at the beginning of the show when I couldn't get you on. And what do you think about that, the Old Testament? Because I was reading it, and it seemed like the God in there is a bit of a bitch.
Yeah. Oh no, he's a psychopathic demon named Jehovah. In fact, I've written in my book, Puzzling People. I write extensively about this, and Christians in America actually went mad over it. Basically, what the Gnostics and what the Cathars said is absolutely true. The proof of it is in the Jehovah Witnesses Bible. If you go and read Genesis in the Jehovah Witnesses Bible, it talks about God created light, God created the earth, all the usual stuff. And right before mankind is created, it suddenly becomes Jehovah God. And this Jehovah God is mentioned all the way through the rest of the Bible. Now, Jehovah, according to the Gnostics and the Cathars, was a psychopathic demon, which he is by his pathology and behavior. Look at Leviticus, for example, posing as the God who created the universe. Now, I think some groups like the Orthodox Jews are kind of aware of this. That's why they don't mention a name and they use the names like the Tetragrammaton and these other kinds of Kabbalistic codes rather than to confront the thing directly. You know, that classic scene in Life of Brian where you don't mention the name of Jehovah and they stone the guy for doing it. And that's because it probably brings the demon into manifestation. This is a whole other subject. The Old Testament is basically a corruption of Canaanite paganism, which existed in that part of the world prior to that. It was converted in, God. Their God was basically El, that El. That became Jehovah at a certain point in biblical history, predominantly when the Jews were held captive in Babylon. And that's where the Babylonian Talmud and Judaism was greatly affected and changed by its time in Babylon. And this is where the whole thing of Molech and all that Baal and all that stuff came from. It is definitely true that the God of the Old Testament is a psychopathic demon, a murderous, jealous, insane demon. That's why I always say to people, I'm anti-Christian. Like, I'm not Christian. I'm a pagan. I'm a heathen. If people prove to me tomorrow that the Christian God is real, I still wouldn't become a Christian simply because of the behavior of this entity called Jehovah in the Old Testament.
What did he do in Leviticus? I haven't got that far yet.
Basically, kills everything for any reason, gloats about it, enjoys it, boasts about it. It's unbelievable. It's literally a horror novel.
Hmm. Gosh, I because I mean I was brought up Catholic and I thought that I wasn't reading the Bible properly, and for years people have said, have you read it? And I'm like, I just can't get it. I felt that I wasn't understanding it because when I read it, it seemed like it was a nasty piece of work. God is a nasty piece of work. And I thought, well, I'm not reading it properly. And then I got this easy to understand Bible called the Message. It's very good. And I'm just reading it again. It is a demon. It definitely is a
Oh
demon.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm all for religious freedom and everything. You want to worship a sparrow, that's your a Coke can, that's your own business. I will defend your right to worship anything you want. For me, I'm at this stage in my life, like yourself, I was raised Catholic as well, although it wasn't a strict Catholic upbringing or anything like that. But I have to say that, like, I'm quite anti Abrahamic religions at this point in my life. I have no time for Christianity, Islam, or the Judaism. I kind of do have time for it because it's not evangelical. The two others, Christianity and Islam, are both evangelical. And when I read about what happened to pagans at the hands of the Christians, the Christian Crusaders, like the Prussian Crusades, and basically what the St. Patrick and the Catholic Church did here in Ireland to the Druids and so on, I become very, very anti-Christian. I don't in any way, relate to that religion. It's completely foreign and alien to me. It's as alien as like if it came from another planet. It's not the religion of Europe. It's been foisted upon us by imperial doctrine. It's totally unnatural to us. The fact that even our feast days celebrate in the middle of winter and stuff like that, our ancestors would have lived like that, and this kind of thing. So yeah, like that I think monotheism was a catastrophe in many ways. The idea of one God, it was a big disaster for the West. I think we would have been much better off. We had been polytheistic societies similar to India, where we had numerous gods and archetypes and goddesses with all their local cultural and regional variations. I think we were much better off. We'd be definitely a more spiritual society.
So what happens in the New Testament when Jesus comes into it? Does Jesus worship this Jehovah as well?
Well, let's look on it that way. I don't believe Jesus existed. I mean, there's no proof of this person called Jesus existed. Yeah, the Romans crucified lots of freedom fighters and fellows who called themselves the Messiah back in those days. There's no proof of anyone this guy even existed. There's the first ones that actually mention his existence are like 70 years after his alleged death, and we're talking about 100 AD, and they're basically secondhand testimonies by someone who claimed to have known him, and that's the earliest mentions we can find. The Romans kept meticulous documents in Judea at that point. I mean, on the alleged weekend, the Passover weekend where he was supposed to have been crucified, you can find Roman documents, on the retiling of the sewers below Jerusalem, but you can't find any mention that the Son of God was killed on Mount Calvary. So he obviously didn't exist. Also, if you look at him in archetypal terms, this whole life story, it's Dionysus, it's Mithra, it's Horus, it's Zoroaster, it's all these other Middle Eastern deities that have been amalgamated into a kind of a McDonald's deity for at the Council of Nicaea in whatever it was, AD, I think it was 320 or 420, and they created the modern Christianity. He wasn't even a god at that period. They decided to make him a god. And so he's basically a kind of a McDonald's IKEA entity that was invented out of pre-existing archetypes that were quite popular in the Middle East and in Persia.
So, excuse my ignorance on the subject. Who made the Bible? Was that an idea to control people? Oh, we'll have this big book and put it together and...
Yeah, more or less. It's that simple. There was the Byzantine Church, which has been the Eastern Roman Empire, as the Roman Empire fragmented into two, the Eastern and Western Empire. The Eastern Empire, the Byzantine, Byzantine, system out of Constantinople, Christianity was rapidly growing. It was a big popular kind of like, it would be like kind of like a cult, a big cult that everyone was following at the time. And so they looked at this idea and he says, this religion is fantastic for kings and emperors, because if you have a god and that's why the Romans liked it as well, and tolerate and helped Christianity. And also, if you have one god and it's the only path to heaven, that means one god in the sky equals one emperor, one king on earth, one law, one capital, one way, one system. So it was a kind of a unifying force towards a kind of a totalitarian way of thinking. And so basically the bishops in the Eastern Orthodox Church essentially got together in Nicaea, which is now in present-day Turkey, and got all these old books from the Middle East And they left out loads, by the way, like the Gospel of St. Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Judas. And they basically just glued them all together and says, this is the Bible. And this guy, and you can actually, this is not an unknown thing. You can actually go and see the debates still exist where they actually, is Jesus a God or is he just a prophet? And they decided in the end that he had more value as a God, as the Son of God in the end, literally, not just as a metaphor in the end. And that's basically how Christianity came about. Basically, powerful political and imperialist interests looking for the perfect macro religion to control their people.
Wow. You just put me off the whole thing in one fell swoop.
Yeah, well, it's like everything else. You can study Christianity, Islam, or any other religion, Judaism, and you can find truths, like interesting ideas within them. But then again, when you find the best stuff that Jesus said, we're not even in the Bible, or the alleged Jesus said, like in the Gospel of Thomas, the kingdom of heaven is within. It was basically kind of a Buddhist or a kind of a Vedic idea, and yet that wasn't even included in the Bible. So it's like, my attitude is we had wonderful religions here. We had Odin, we had all the Irish gods and goddesses, we had the Slavic god and goddesses. What are we doing bringing in this cold, dead, empty stuff from the land of sand and goats, That's what I feel about it.
I had a vision of Odin a while ago and everyone was going, that's the demon, that's the demon.
Oh, stay away from Christians. Tell me about your...
It was because I do astral projection. It just happens. And I just kind of rose higher and higher through different levels. And I came face to face with a giant, and I just was quite as big as it's one of its lips. And I thought, oh, I'm seeing God, because he was so huge. And the feeling of love from me to him was like so strong. And I felt love back, and I felt that here was my father, my true father. And I looked at his face and it was curled up in like anger. And I turned and he was fighting this big, it's almost like a kind of a serpent stroke dragon that's tail was wrapped around the earth and sparks of it was flying off over the earth. It stayed with me. It stayed with me for a long, long time. This feeling of that creature being Odin. He kind of communicated to me Odin, and I'd never even heard of it. I had to Google it the next day and investigate who that actually was. But I really felt kinship, like I was this entity's daughter.
Yeah.
But since then, so many people have put me off and said that's a demon. And
oh, tell him to go away. It sounds like you did encounter something like that. The snake thing is fantastic. You described perfectly the Midgard serpent, the snake that wraps around the earth that fights with the Aesir gods of the Viking world.
But that doesn't exist, right?
Well, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor.
Metaphor.
Yeah, but maybe it does exist. I wrote a book last year called The Druid Code, which is about my sort of like spiritual journey was through megaliths and mythology and magic in the last since I was a teen. And the Midgard serpent, which in Nordic mythology is basically a serpent of fire that wraps around the earth with its head somewhere in the North Atlantic. Well, that's exactly where the tectonic plates, where the Earth's continents join, where all the volcanic and activity is. It follows. It's a perfect serpent that wraps around the earth. So maybe the metaphor and the allegory is reflected in the reality of the five sense experience. You find that in lots of things. You find things are set as allegory and metaphor in many pagan or even like Vedic Eastern religions, like the idea of the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is about the subconscious mind. You have all these other things about they're really talking about the electromagnetic spectrum, or they're talking about in allegory, they're talking about the quantum field. So you find that like human beings in the past, if we didn't have a language to describe things scientifically, we would describe them in metaphor and in poetic terms.
Oh, I see. Do you think that there is a god like Odin? Well, Odin, the word Odin means unknowable, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, Odin is, they're archetypes. So they say, maybe your ancestry is of Viking heritage. So when you were doing your astral traveling, you encountered Odin as the archetype, it manifested in a physical form. And that's probably how you saw him. Someone else might see Perun,
Oh, I see.
like that kind of thing. But it's the same. You may have it in you, racially within you. Maybe your ancestors were, Vikings or something, and so that's why it appeals to you. It's like, and that, so that's why it came to you that way. If you were a Chinese, you might see a Buddhist type entity when you
Oh, I
go up
see.
there. Yeah, it's a bespoke experience. It's germane to the person who has the experience.
So what does that mean? Does that mean there's lots of different gods, or there is just one and we all see it in different ways?
Well, the way I see it is there's no God as such, right? There's a force, an intelligent force to the universe. Call it the quantum field, call it magic, call it whatever you want, but it's a force. Culturally, we resolve it in a certain way that suits us in cultural terms. So, for instance, in Ireland, in pre-Christian Ireland, our gods were, the River Shannon, that kind of thing. They were born out of the landscape that we lived around. Like the River Shannon is named after a goddess. The country of Ireland, Éire, is named after Eru, which is the goddess that represented Ireland. And this would be reflected all over the world. You would have this everywhere, where you'd have like seasons or changes in the landscape or things like this, or features in the landscape would be represented by gods. In fact, that's what happened to the Greeks. That's when the Greeks all went wrong, because they took their gods from the earth and transferred them to constellations in the heavens. But yeah, so you resolve the archetypes culturally to what you know and to what you're aware of. And that's what happens. But the underlying force is it's just like the Jews and the Hebrews say, it's the unknowable force. It's the center of when like a mandala, the center of the mandala, the white dot at the center of the Rosicrucian cross, the center of the Celtic cross, the center of the swastika. It's the unknowable God at the middle, as Carl Jung called it. But we resolve it through everything from like geometry to mythology to spiritual ideas.
Oh, I see. Oh, does that mean because we've got this thing about evil and evil and how a good God would create evil? I mean, is that going to resolve itself after time, or what's going to happen with that, and why did that come about?
Well, maybe evil isn't evil in the sense that we think it is. Maybe it's just like the other side of the universe. Like you have like in electronics, you have a positive charge and negative charge. You have the duality everywhere, male, female, as above, so below. Maybe good can't exist without evil, and evil can't exist without good. It's a yin yang type dynamic. And therefore, if we eliminated evil from the universe, we'd probably vanish and the universe would disappear.
Do you think so?
Yeah, because it's a dynamic force. Remember, things are changing. You can't make an electric motor spin without positive and negative poles. And you have to energize both at the same time. You take away the negative pole of a magnet, it doesn't work anymore. You take away the positive pole of a magnet, it doesn't work anymore. I have this kind of like sort of philosophical approach to it, that it's because of evil that we've developed so much good in the world, compassion and empathy for the suffering of humanity and the suffering of others, and stewardship of the planet, because we can see an injustice is simply an injustice, or a wickedness is simply the motion, the perpetual balance of the natural universe thrown into chaos, and it must be corrected. And I would say the same thing with the positive side as well. I mean, have you ever been around people who are positive all the time? They'll drive you up the fucking wall. They'll drive you insane, because after a while you realize it's a fake. It's not true. It's a kind of a compensated drug. And there's something inherent in their psyche that's not dynamic. So my attitude is like, we have the positive, we have the negative, and the reason having both is why the universe exists.
It does actually. There's that wonderful book. I don't know if you've read it, A Voyage to Arcturus by David Lindsay. Have you read that?
No, I don't know about it.
Oh, it's pretty good. At the end of it, he kind of meets his higher self, which is Nightspore, and he turns around. He said to this little yellow dwarf that's been following him around, "What's your name on Earth?" And Crag says, "My name is Pain on Earth." And he says, "Yeah, I think I've known that." So I think pain, it does make you. I know I've certainly had a lot of it. It makes you definitely more compassionate and more
Yeah.
caring to others around you.
And look at the unit. Look at the natural world around you. Things die and they regrow. Winter has to happen for spring to occur. It's the natural mechanics of the universe. You have like a deity in Vedic Indian like mythology or religions, such as like Kali. Seems quite a frightening idea on the surface that this like woman goes around killing people and chopping their heads off. But like the death card in the tarot, it's really about rejuvenation and the recycling of forces. I always loved that Aleister Crowley, Lady Farida Harris image of the death card in their tarot, where it's a skeleton, a machine skeleton at the bottom of the ocean, and using a scythe, he's scooping all the dead material from the ocean up into bubbles and throwing it back to the surface as new life. So you've got to, when you got to be, I developed my attitude towards it is it's all good and it's all crap. And the actual process as us as in this experience is to try and resolve it in such a way that we have an interesting and a fruitful life.
Yeah, exactly. We do. I often struggle and I think I want to make my life meaningful. And then suddenly I thought there's a lot of peace in letting go of that, isn't there? And not pushing yourself to sort of, to do something meaningful. It's nice just to sort of exist without
Yeah,
putting
I
yourself
used
under
to be I
pressure.
used to be a very ambitious. I came from a very poor background. I was a very ambitious person. I spent say the first 30 odd years of my life trying to escape poverty. Even when I was making tons of money, I was still in the impression I still had this neurotic fear of being poor like when I was a kid. And then I realized that was just pointless because I wasn't really creating anything except a reaction to the neuroses that drove me. So it served its purpose. It got me out of the ghetto. It made me in pursuit of a better life. But after a while, I become a kind of a parody of myself. And then I realized like anything that's been good from that point on, whether it's painting a painting, writing a piece of music, or writing a piece of text, when there was no struggle, and when I say struggle, I don't mean like, this kind of thing of like angst or anything. I mean, when it just happened, the muse took care of everything, and I became like, as what Mozart said, the conduit for these forces that exist beyond this reality, in a good way. And you just let it happen. Because when you struggle against things, I found that was basically what would kill them.
Hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean. I've started sort of thinking, oh, I want to make money, want to make money. I've got to a certain age, I haven't got enough. And then concentrating on trying to, hit it big with something, you kind
Yeah.
of end up failing and then you get bitter and, oh
Yeah,
God.
and there's nothing wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be famous and successful. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make a few quid and getting some money. There's nothing. They're all noble things. Unfortunately, it's like that. I can remember one time years ago, a friend of mine getting a lotto ticket, and the lotto had only really started in Ireland, and he was almost like under this mind control thing that if you bought a lotto ticket, you'd probably win. And we're sitting there watching the TV come on, and they're calling out the lotto numbers. And to see how he went from his excitement as the numbers were started to be called out to the third number in where he knew he was going to win nothing. It just depressed me so much because it was so dark. It was so dark. And I was saying to myself, that's the kind of situation I'm never going to find myself in. I'll just do my stuff, throw it out there like what chaos magicians do, throw it out there into the universe. And if it comes back as something meaningful, great. If it doesn't, it was a learning process along the way.
Yeah, that's right. Getting too attached and too with the outcome of what you're writing or
Or
making.
a relationship, they can be the worst that way. The idea
Yeah.
of fighting to make it better. it's dead if you have to go to that extreme.
Exactly. So what are you working on at the moment, Thomas?
Right now, while I'm making a series of films, I've made a film called Occult Dublin and another one on Malta. And I've been going around Europe filming interesting occultic locations, Freemasonic lodges, any kind of things where funny business went on, a bit of history. I'm off to Germany, Holland, a few other places in the next few months. And I take my camera, take my books, and make these films because I think people think that stuff's been overdone to death. It hasn't, because it hasn't been done properly. And I want to do this stuff justice without like it any being any kind of fear connected to it. Just saying, look, we have these occult orders, and they run the world. I'm working on a follow-up book. I've written a book on Nazi occultism called Walpurgis Night, and I'm working on the second edition of that at the moment. And also, on top of that, I'm going around thinking about the idea of writing a book on Nordic mythology, of all things. So yeah, I'll always have something going on in my head. What resolves itself in the end is what resolves, and what doesn't, it's always useful.
That's interesting. So what camera do you take with you?
I have a Nikon P900, the one with the super powerful zoom. So it allows me to zoom up, and it takes HD video. So it allows me to zoom up on the statues or the symbols on the side of buildings. Like I got some fantastic shots of the friezes on the customs house in Dublin, which is this enormous it's basically a temple to the goddess Britannia. And I was able to get right up into the statues and get the expressions on the faces and things like that. So it's actually opened up a whole new world for me, because it's allowing me to actually take the visual sort of narrative into the belly of the beast, where a regular camera couldn't do that. So, and it's not a huge camera either. And so that's basically the Nikon P900. It's a pretty sensational machine, actually.
Oh, excellent. And then where can we get to see your films?
Okay, if you go, my occult films are on a YouTube channel called Open Source Occult TV. Open Source Occult TV, one word. But if you just type in Occult Dublin or Occult Malta, they'll come up. And my website is thomassheridanarts.com, and links to everything are from there.
Oh, excellent. I'm going to look at that as soon as I get off here. It'll be interesting. So the shows we did last week, we did some talking about Mengele. I had some past life recall of being as a German, and being a German orphan, and meeting Mengele and experiencing all sorts of stuff. And so did this other girl, and it's odd. I mean, what do you think of Mengele? Do you think he's sort of still living in sort of other dimensions?
Well, he definitely survived the war. We know that for a fact, because he was smuggled out of Europe by Operation Odessa, which was basically ex-SS officers who were smuggling out. That's why the ones who died the ones who swung at the Nuremberg trials were basically the Mickey Mouse bureaucrats, the real hardcore ones like Mengele and Van Braun, and Albert Speer. They all got away. They were much more useful to the Allies. But Mengele definitely got away. We know that for an absolute fact.
What was it called? Operation what? Sorry.
Odessa.
Oh, right. Oh.
And it was an underground network in the 1950s. It lasted till the 70s, actually, of SS officers basically smuggling out their buddies. Now, Odessa, we do know that was blown open by David Yallop, the fantastic British journalist, in his amazing book, In God's Name, which is about Propaganda Due, the Italian Freemasonic order, which murdered the first Pope John Paul I, and their connections with the banking system and the Freemasons in Britain. But he had pictures of Mengele that he'd found. Mengele was coming back from Peru and Argentina, where he was living. He was coming back to Switzerland to go skiing with his. That's what he was from. He was actually German of Swiss heritage, skiing with his sons in the Alps. So he enjoyed a millionaire's wonderful lifestyle after the war. So someone somewhere was protecting him. And yeah, these Nazi networks, a lot of them escaped into Central America, into Peru, into Paraguay, where they were given willing, enthusiastic welcomes by dictators and military military people. There's a very good movie called The Colony or La Colonia, and it's about basically a German Nazi and it's a true story, who set up in I think it was Chile, or as Argentina was Chile, who set up basically a continuation of the Third Reich's death camps in a cult, and it was a cult, and they were actually running the cult on behalf of the Chilean military, and to teach them, and like one point they talk about that they're creating them to test weapons on them and things like that. So the Nazi, what I always maintain the point, the Germans lost World War II. The German people lost World War II. The National Socialists won.
They won.
They won. Because they created NASA, all the corporations they set up, like, Prince Bernhard, who was like the high-ranking SS officer. He sets up the Bilderberg. He marries, he's part of the whole Royal House of Orange. He's an enormous business leader, political leader. He was probably one of the architects of the European Union. He goes on like no business. Albert Speer goes on after he gets an early release from Spandau prison, where they kept Hess for the rest of his life, goes off and does his thing. Von Braun is brought over to the United States, where he develops the Apollo program for NASA. Basically, NASA could have been called Nazi because it was basically the head Nazi, the head of the Nazi armaments division that put Neil Armstrong on the moon and built all the rockets. The Saturn V rocket was basically the German V2 weapon, and so on. The rest of them all got into banking. I mean, so many of the corporations like Krupps and even like IG Farben, that was dissolved, but it continued under other names. Yeah, like the Nazis, the big time Nazis all survived. Maybe even Hitler survived. I mean, there's no proof that on Walpurgis night, April 30th, 1945, that he actually died. I mean, there was a plane waiting in Potsdam Platz in Berlin, and it's very plausible that him and Eva Braun got on that plane and escaped to South America via submarine.
I thought most people say that the Jews control the world right now.
No, they don't. The world is controlled by aristocratic families, and they allow certain groups to have a little bit of a game now and again. Like, for instance, for decades, the Irish controlled America. For decades. For over 100 years, the Irish were the most powerful force in America. They moved back, Jews took over. Jews will step down, someone else like Puerto Ricans or someone else will take over. These are just fashions for now. And that's just a religion or an ethnic group. If you look inside it, it's actually the aristocrats. For instance, Irish Americans, right? When the Irish Americans were really powerful in the United States, the Kennedys tried to make out that they were, a poor family who came over during the famine to America. The reality is that even JFK is on record of boasting that his family, the Fitzgeralds, were Irish nobility, which they are. Fitzgeralds were Irish nobility. And the Kennedy part was actually Genovese, which was an Italian mercantile family, aristocrats, which is also what produced Christopher Columbus. And so these people they're aristocrats of the same bloodlines. You have like the Venetian and the Roman black nobility. They control basically the Vatican. That's basically every Italian pope gets in there as one of them. You have all these different networks, but they're all basically answering. The most powerful ones on earth, without a shadow of doubt, is the British royal family. There's nothing even comes close to them, who are actually Prussians. They're actually descendants of Prussian aristocrats. And so that if there was one absolute and utter power source on this earth, it is the British royal family and all the European monarchs who are descended from that Prussian bloodline, which is nearly all of them.
Hey, right. I believed all this stuff about saying the Jews control the banking system and Hollywood. It's their fault the world's in a mess.
Yeah, but that's just the same old crap that's peddled for years. What does that achieve? I mean, it achieves nothing. You see, you have people like David Icke, and his audience are of extremely low intelligence. Like the average David Icke fan I wouldn't trust them to know how to peel a banana or a skin off a banana. And yet these people think they're experts and they're woken up because David has told them something about this kind of nonsense. You see, just when this is where all this crap comes from. And where did David Icke and that bunch get all their knowledge from? They got it from Bible Belt Christian fundamentalists in the 1970s and 60s in the US, groups like the Posse Comitatus and all these kind of white nationalist Christian identity groups. And they were the ones that came with the idea that Jews ran the world and there was a new world order and there was all this stuff. Now, that's not to say there isn't a new world order. I think there actually is, but I think it happens by accident more than by design. There's no Mr. Burns running the show. The ones who run the show are the ones who have the most accumulated wealth, and that's the British royal family by far. I mean, they have so much wealth. It's terrifying. I mean, like Prince Philip or Prince Charles, big ears, Mr. Tampon, he owns the whole of Cornwall and huge sections of Scotland. This is how powerful these people are. And so, yeah, this is what we're dealing with. Now, I wouldn't. That thing has been peddled around since that ridiculous Protocols of Zion thing. Turns out to be, it's a forged document anyway. That was based on a Freemasonic a satire at the time of Napoleon III dealing with Freemasons in France, and it keeps getting rewritten. Now, that's on a lot of that is nonsense when you get into it. Yeah, the Jewish people are incredibly powerful, but so are Italian Americans, so are Irish people. I mean, look at the Irish; they're incredibly powerful. Peter Sutherland, the head of the World Bank, the head of Goldman Sachs. I mean, the guy only has to say something, and people, but no one ever talks about the Irish conspiracy. And there's loads like him. The guy that ran Heinz, what was his name? I can't remember his name now. And then you'd have like all the British magnates and all the French ones and everyone else. It's almost like that. When someone says that, I says, you're not with the program. You're not looking deeper than the childlike view of it. You know, and then they get all wired up when they see things that happen in Israel and stuff like that. And they see things that happen in Palestine, and they say, "Oh, there's the proof." But I mean, the reality is that the Arab oil Gulf states are the ones who betrayed the Palestinians more than anyone else. They're the ones who can protect them, and they won't do anything for them. So there's all kinds of games going on. I will never get to the point where I'll say it's any one group. I'll just point to the ones who have the most power are the British royal family at the moment. And are they infallible? No. Can they be taken down? Yes. Will they be taken down? Of course they will. That's my attitude.
What do you think of Trump?
I think I don't think he's the devil that he's made out to be. I think it's a very interesting, like Brexit. It's a spanner in the works of the world. It's a kick up the bum that we needed, and anything that rattles the Bisto out of the establishment is all right in my book.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, thank God we didn't get Hillary Clinton.
We'd be looking at a nuclear war right now if she was in power.
Yeah, things are being really dark.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
So you don't agree, you don't believe rather in reptilians like David does?
Well, because he's not very well educated himself, and that's not to say he's stupid. The man is not stupid. The man is a brilliant communicator. The man is fantastic at that. But he's not educated enough to be talking about the things that he is. It's just as simple as that. And his dot connecting is basically just prejudicial associations to make his theory stand up. Now, regarding the reptilians thing, right? He has it in his head that the reptilians are real because all through history this is artwork of reptiles and reptiles this and all this kind of thing. But he ignores all the half man, half cows, half man, half birds, the half man, half fish. You understand? This is anthropomorphic art. Or zoomorphic art. There are ways our ancestors used to describe human traits or human experiences by saying. So suppose a guy was really horny. He was always up for the women, and he was always aggressive. He would be a bull. He'd be a minotaur. Where someone like snakes and reptilians. This is another thing that bothers me about that. Snakes and reptilians in every single heathen and pagan tradition represent wisdom, from the Kundalini to the Druids. and yet he's turned it around and says they represent evil. They don't. That's all Christian nonsense again because of the snake in the bloody Garden of Eden and all this stuff. These are traits. These are These are zoomorphic.
Who was that snake in the Garden of Eden?
The serpent he's just called, and the snake in the Garden of Eden is the allegorical description of human free will. That's all that is.
See.
That's all he represents when he says to them, look, he says, Adam and Eve, why are you letting that Jehovah bully you around? Do what you want. And she took the apple. Apple is a very significant, symbolic thing. And she took a bite from it. And her and Adam committed original sin. That original sin was freedom of expression and independence. And the snake represented, like Lucifer, standing up to the bullies.
Oh, well, thanks, Thomas. You were a great guest. I've really enjoyed listening to you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry again I was late. Next time.
God bless, and thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the guest. I guess Thomas Sheridan as much as I did. Thank you for listening. Bye.